This video is brought to you by the 3-Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon. Kia ora koutou, and welcome to this very special video, 10 reasons to play board game solo and 10 games to play solo. Now this video is 10 reasons I like to play board games solo. They might not be the same reasons as yours. That said, I think they do cover a lot of the reasons that people do pick up the solo board gaming hobby. And if you're not one of those people into solo board gaming, that's fine, you can watch too. Maybe you'll learn a bit about why people play board games solo. And if you do have other reasons for why you play solo board games, let me know in the comments. I'd really like to hear your stories. And quickly, a reminder that 3-Minute Board Games does not do paid content, and none of these games paid to be here. If you'd like to keep our channel independent and our editorials free of product placement, please support us on Patreon. Anyway, now with that out of the way, let's get on to the list. There's this idea out there that solo board gaming is comparatively new, that it's something that's really only happened a lot in the last 5 or 10 years, and I think that's quite misleading. If I was to put this arrangement of cards in front of you, I'm 99% sure you'll know exactly how to play this solo board game. Well, solo card game, but we tend to count card games and board games as being one and the same these days. This game is solitaire, or in some parts of the world it's known as patience. And if you see a red king pop up, well, you know that you need to put a black queen on it in order to get the red jack out. This is a solo game. And this is a solo game that was taught to me by my grandmother back in the 80s. And she had played that game her entire life. So one of my very first memories of playing cards is sitting at the dining table after dinner with my grandmother when I'm about 8 or 9. And she's just sitting there playing round after round after round of patience. It was kind of her thing to unwind once all the dishes and stuff were done. And my grandmother wasn't exactly a big geek. She played bridge, and she played patience, and she played a bunch of other card games because it was exceedingly normal. The idea of an older woman sitting down at a table and playing patience by herself, completely and utterly normal in that day. So I'm not sure why solo gaming or playing board games by yourself became this weird thing when it used to be quite normal only a generation or two ago. And that extends to other things as well, because solo gaming isn't just picking up a hobby board game and playing it with the solo rules. There's a whole bunch of other puzzles and solo type games, like Sudoku, like jigsaws, like crosswords. People have been doing those sort of puzzles for time immemorial. So yeah, solo board gaming isn't really that weird. I think it's the invention of computer games that have made people think, oh, that's a weird thing to do, when it really isn't. So solo gaming, it was good enough for my gran, it's good enough for you. And my game recommendation for this reason is Regicide, because Regicide is a modern board game you can play with a standard set of cards. And if you want to find out more about Regicide, check out our 3-minute recap video on that. And you can find that link in the description. But the long and the short of it is, Regicide is a neat little cooperative game that you can play with a basic deck of cards. But, you know, it is nice to support the guys who designed it by buying one of their custom sets. It's got really simple rules, but gee, it's a hard game. It's also made by a bunch of Kiwis, so go Badgers from Mars. The number 2 reason I have for solo board gaming is, well, sometimes it's just hard to get players for a full campaign and get them to commit. And sometimes you want to play through a campaign game, and well, if no one's going to be around for the whole time, the game's just going to sit on your shelf otherwise. So sometimes, if you want to get through a campaign, you have to just play it solo. And there are 2 great game examples for that. The first one is Oathsworn, and the second one is ISS Vanguard. Now, I have a group that want to play Oathsworn all the way through, but we still haven't yet, and it's been over a year now. So I don't think that's going to happen. If I'm going to play this through, it's probably going to be by myself. And if we play it through again with that group, that's probably fine. But I'm thinking that I might just do Oathsworn by myself. I'm definitely doing ISS Vanguard by myself. I'm a reasonable way through this one. And that is a game that I can set up and I can play by myself. I know, yeah, it probably might be a bit better with more players, but I actually want to see what happens in ISS Vanguard. And I'm not sure I could get a group reliably enough to get through both of these. In addition to all my other requirements I have to do for the channel, with all the game testing we need to do. So sometimes you'll buy a game. Gloomhaven would be another great game in this spot, where you're like, the commitment to play this through and getting all those people together and sorting out all their schedules and committing to the runtime for it. So for Oathsworn, that's like 20 sessions. That's a big commitment from a lot of people. And sometimes it's just easier to go, you know what? I think I'll play this one by myself just to experience. Otherwise, it's going to collect dust. So my number 2 reason is people have busy lives. If you can't get people to commit to a long-term campaign, you can just play it yourself. Might not be as much fun, but it's still a pretty good time, and I'm really enjoying ISS Vanguard. Number 3 is you can't alpha game a game when you're playing by yourself. So this is a double-edged sword, because it does mean you can play a game in peace without someone alpha gaming and telling you what to do. Or if you are an alpha gamer, you can play the game without alienating people. And I personally, I have had to train myself for years not to just sit there and tell everyone how to play games. As you can imagine, I spend a lot more time playing games than most of my friends, especially cooperative games. And I usually figure out the systems faster than most people. So I spend quite a bit of time in co-ops just biting my tongue and letting people make their own decisions and their own mistakes. If they ask for advice, I give it, but it's taken some time for me not to just be the guy who goes, you need to move there. That's the best move. Go there. Go there. Because that's not really that much fun for anyone else. But sometimes I like to play those cooperative games by myself, especially so I can dial up the difficulty a little. And the sort of games I'm talking about are things like any of the Pandemic games. And the one I've picked up here is Pandemic: The Clone Wars. Because this is a slightly different Pandemic game, and I actually think it's one of the best in the series. But it's also a game where there's no hidden information. So if you are playing it cooperatively, and there is one person who knows the game better, they can, pretty easily tell everyone what to do. But if you're playing it by yourself, it's fine, and it's a small enough and contained game that it flies by pretty quickly, and it's just as fun solo as it is cooperative. In fact, so many cooperative games like Pandemic The Clone Wars, are just as good as solo games. Sure, you might have to play multi-handed, but I've never subscribed to the puritanical view that a solo board game has to only have one character or if it's not a true solo game. I think that's artificially limiting yourself in a ridiculous way. And sure, those people who put those restrictions on themselves, that's fine, but your restrictions don't have to apply to anyone else. I really do recommend playing a bunch of cooperative games multi-handed. It's a really good time. And Pandemic: The Clone Wars, legitimately a good game. And the 4th reason is there's a bunch of good games that are essentially solo-only games. Now I'm going to bring out these 2. The first one is Dawn of the Zeds, which you no doubt heard me talk about many times before. And the other one is Nemo's War. Now, both these games do have a cooperative mode in them, but it's rubbish. It's absolutely rubbish. These were designed to be played solo, and the cooperative modes are bolted on. There's a few other games out there like Pavlov's House and Halls of Hegra that are legitimate solo as well. And they're great experiences. They're great games. Dawn of the Zeds in particular is one of the roughest, nastiest, most vicious and ornery games you will ever play. It will kick your butt so many damn times. And you'll love it. If you get into it, of course. Like, it's one of those games that's got a high level of complexity and a very high skill ceiling. But it tells stories like nothing else. And the cooperative rules for it they don't work. They do not work remotely as well as playing it solo. And sometimes in board gaming, designers design games specifically for that solo mode. Final Girl is another game that fits this category, along with Hostage Negotiator. These are solo-only games, and they're great. And sure, if solo gaming's not for you, it's not for you. But there is this great niche of solo design games that you can really check out. So I've literally just recommended 6 games that are solo only. And each of these 6 I would highly recommend as a great entry point to solo gaming. Because there's something about a game that was designed first and foremost as a solo experience that sets it apart from games that might have a good solo mode. And that's that they got the designer's full attention. And they got the benefit of the designer's full vision when bringing them to life. And there's an awful lot of games that have solo modes that aren't particularly great. But all of these games, They were designed for solo play, and they're just excellent games as well. Reason number 5, you can savor the game and take your time. Now, this one might not be true for everyone because not everyone has a place where they can leave a game set up. I have the good fortune of being able to leave a game set up for an extended period of time, so I can play it for a bit and then come back to it later. And this allows me to enjoy some games in a way that I might not in a timed session. And 2 of the games I really like setting up and playing over time are by the same designer, and they are Robinson Crusoe and First Martians. Now, both of these were designed as cooperative games, but they really feel like solo games to me. And they play better as solo games as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I've never played First Martians cooperative, and I don't think I'd ever want to. Both of these games are quite thematic, rich, and dense experiences. And I've just found that when you play games like this in a group, you tend to sort of blitz through them. You don't really kind of live them and save them. Another game that could fit in this category for other people would be This War of Mine. But I do actually prefer This War of Mine with a group. The games where you can take time to puzzle things out, where you can think of a good solution, and where you can just kind of mill about and think, how's this going to proceed without slowing down the table? Because when you're playing a cooperative game in a group, there's a social contract that the game's going to move along at a pace. And I tend to find I like playing these 2 games quite a bit slower than that. Just leaving them set up, playing a round or 2, having a think about it, going away and doing something else and coming back to them. Now, if I was going to recommend one of these games, it would be Robinson Crusoe. Generally, First Martians isn't very well regarded, but I have a theory behind that, and that's because in Robinson Crusoe, you start out with nothing and you build up, so you have a sense of progress. Whereas in First Martians, you start off with a lot of stuff and it all breaks as you go along. And that makes the game inherently feel less advancing, less progress, less enjoyable for many people. I like them both. So yeah, reason 5, you can take your time and you're not forced along by the pace of the group. You can afford to have your own little bits of analysis paralysis. You can even afford to go away for a whole day and have a good think about what you're going to do next turn. Because there's no one sitting at the table going, is it my turn yet? No, it's normally me being the one saying it, is it my turn yet? So, reason number 6 is illness. Now, I've told the story on the channel before, but it was about 6 years ago. And it's all to do with Arkham Horror 2nd Edition, a game I got in 2005 when it came out. Now, around 2006 to 2007, I had a freak virus. It really, really messed me up, and the main symptoms of it were pericarditis and myocarditis, which is swelling of the sac around the heart and inflammation on the heart. It was a life-threatening illness, and I ended up in the cardio ward at Wellington Hospital 3 times for extended periods, and at one point they gave me a 50-50 of making it through the night. It was terrifying, to say the least. And for the rest of the time, for that year and a bit, I had symptoms that could best be described as chronic fatigue. Breathing was difficult. Moving was difficult. Going up and down a flight of stairs would ruin me for the rest of the day. And I was living in a terrible single-box hovel of a place, a boarding house, where I had communal bathrooms, communal showers, all that kind of stuff. It was pretty nasty and pretty gnarly. But the one thing it had was a good-sized table in the room I was renting. I didn't have internet either. So I was without internet for 2 years, nearly. And what I did have, though, in that time was Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. And you bet your ass I played that so many times because I couldn't really go out and socialize. I could have people over somewhat, but I was literally in a one-room sort of place, and the table was the most dominating thing. I did have people over, but it was still kind of weird. And I had the computer there, but with no internet, I was basically down to a handful of games that I had already on that machine. So I played a lot of Arkham Horror in that time, and it was a big deal for me. It's probably the reason why I'm so passionately part of the hobby now, and why I'm such a big advocate for solo board gaming, because I was really lonely, and it was not a great time. And one of those things of having something to do to just pass the hours, and oh my, so many hours sitting there playing games. And I had friends and people came and saw me, and I had a good friend Paul who would pick me up and take me places. But it was a challenging time, and Arkham Horror was there for me, and solo board gaming was there for me, and so yeah, to anyone out there who does solo game because you're not well, I get you. And for those of you who are going to get better, best wishes. And for those of you who aren't, my condolences. But anyway, illness. So it's a really, really good reason to solo board game. And to take a positive turn now, it's also a very smart and savvy thing to do if you are infectious. If you, instead of going to your games group, do some solo gaming at home. If you think you're going to spread something around, don't. Play some solo board games instead of going out there and spreading bugs around. You may save a life. The seventh reason for solo gaming is you can dial it up to 11. Now this means you can take a game and do whatever you really want with it. In a group, sometimes you'll want to play a game, but you'll have new players so you won't play with expansions. Or you'll have to play it on a lower complexity level. What you can do when you're solo gaming is you can dial the game up as high a difficulty as you damn well want. And two really good examples of that. The first one is for Spirit Island. If you want to play with 6 spirits on 6 different islands, and you want to play against a level 6 enemy in a scenario, you can do that. You can just set that up and play that game by yourself. Because finding a group that will play to your level in some games can get a bit tricky. Especially in a game like Spirit Island, where the difference between difficulty 0 in a game and, difficulty 10 and 12 is really, really noticeable. Another game I like dialing the difficulty up in is XCOM the board game. But that's mostly by playing all the parts myself. Because this is a real-time game. And normally in a group, you've got 4 people making 4 different sets of decisions. So you get a little bit of thinking time while the other players are acting. If you're playing this one by yourself, dialed up to 11, you play all the characters at the same time. And it's really intense. Solo board gaming just gives you that opportunity to stretch your legs and do some wacky, complex things that others might not necessarily be into. And you can definitely dial the difficulty up of a whole bunch of your favorite games. And if you're far more experienced with a game than the people you play the game with normally are, well, then you can use solo gaming as an opportunity to explore those extra difficulty modes, to explore that complexity, and explore that diversity that the game offers. And this is no knock on most of my friends, but they really can't hang with me with Spirit Island. My 8th reason for solo board gaming is to theorize and strategize. And what I'm talking about there is setting up a multiplayer game like a Game of Thrones and playing all the parts by yourself, just to figure out the game and get a deeper understanding of it. This was another one of the games I had when I was unwell, and I had that time where I had an awful lot of time to myself to play board games. Most of the time I spent playing Arkham Horror, that's for sure. But I also played dozens of games of a Game of Thrones where I set up all of the different factions and compartmentalized mentally playing through the game as all the different factions. Now that might sound a little crazy, but it's a fun way to explore a game, is to set it up and play all parts. And you sort of set each faction an objective and a goal. And you can't bluff or necessarily outmaneuver yourself because you are playing all the parts. But you can explore a game and understand its fundamentals and, see how some strategies and different approaches might work. You can do this with games that don't have solo modes. This one is just a regular sort of competitive multiplayer game. Or you can pick up games like Fire in the Lake here, which you can get an expansion for, the trunk expansion that comes with a really good solo bot. So you can set up bot players in some games and still do the same thing. You're really focused on one faction there and the bot's playing the others, but you're trying to explore and discover a game and the strategies within it. And that's another one of my reasons for liking solo board gaming. I just habitually do this. I habitually set up games and explore them and discover them. A lot of the testing on the channel I do in person, of course, and I do with other people. But I also, once I've played games with people, set the game up again and go through it and look at it. And look at the cards, look at the potential strategies, play multiple hands from different perspectives, just to get a deeper understanding of the game. And that is another form of solo gaming. You might not necessarily be playing the game as intended in some cases, like with Game of Thrones, with it being an intensely multiplayer game, but it's still fun and it's still interesting. It's just looking at the game more like a puzzle than a game at that particular moment in time. My number 9 reason for playing solo board games is it keeps your brain healthy and smart. There is a lot of study out there that says doing puzzles and other activities designed to stimulate your brain are really good long term. And I'm talking as you get older with things like Alzheimer's and dementia. Doing puzzles helps, in a lot of cases, stave off those effects. This isn't a hard rule that if you do puzzles, you're never going to get dementia. But there is a lot of study out there that says that they definitely do help. And they do help with mental health as well. So I'm going to include something here that's technically not a board game. It's Rush Hour. It's a little traffic jam game. And it's a game where you're trying to get these, move these parts around so you can get your car out. And it's all about moving these cars in such a way that, there we go, that one down that way, that one that way, and that one's got to go there, and we're out. You know, this is a relatively simple puzzle, but these kind of puzzles are just really good. This particular game comes with dozens of these puzzles, and they're all locked away in here, and you just go through them. There's lots of apps that do this as well. But I just find leaving this one lying around, if I'm ever in a sort of fidgety mood, I just kind of set it up, do a couple of puzzles, and it's really great. It's really quite a satisfying little thing. But it doesn't have to be solo board gaming. But solo board gaming can help keep you smarter as you're getting a bit older. If not solo board gaming, I do recommend doing crosswords. I do recommend doing puzzles. I do recommend doing all that kind of stuff to keep this thing sharp for as long as you possibly can. Because there's a recurring joke that board gaming is an unhealthy hobby because we're sitting around tables, and I don't necessarily think that's true. Sure, going for a run helps one part of you, but you need to keep your brain sharp. You need to keep that exercised as well. And puzzles and solo board gaming are great for that. And the 10th and final reason I play solo board games is because it's fun. I just enjoy doing it. And I'm going to bring out 2 games I in particular find fun solo play. And they are Heat, Pedal to the Metal, and Sentinels of the Multiverse, for very different reasons. Sentinels up first. This is because there's so much to do in this game. There's so many different modes of play, so many different bad guys, so many different decks you can play around with and explore and discover. This is one of those games that you could literally play nothing else the rest of your life if you wanted to. If you were going to play a game of Sentinels a night, that could keep you occupied with all the different combinations for so long. There's just so much to it. And I love that. I love that there's always, no matter how many times I've played it against the different baddies and with the different characters, I always find some different combination of effects or powers. And that's neat. I love that about Sentinels of the Multiverse. And the other one I'm going to give you, at the other end of the spectrum, is Heat. And this has just got such a simple solo mode that replicates how your opponent's cars will work. And you can just focus on playing one car and have like 5 other bots or 6 other bots with the expansion, and you can just put them out there and race and just have a good time. You can set the game up, go, I'm going to do 4 races, blam, 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 all done. And it's just fun. It's just fun to set up the cars and go racing. And ultimately, to me, that is what solo board gaming is all about. It's about having a good time. And it's about having a good time on your terms. Because as a solo gamer, you'll decide what you're going to play. You're going to decide where you're going to play it, when you're going to play it, and how complex it's going to be, how long it's going to take. Sometimes it's difficult to fit into a group, or to have a group accept you. And at other times, it's difficult to find times to be with people when it suits them. And at other times, it's just too much of an ask. And solo gaming, it just has such a low barrier to entry. Once you've got a little bit of space and you make the time for it, it will be there for you. And that's why I think it's a very special sub-part of this hobby. And I know solo gaming's been a big part of my life, and if it's been a big part of your life, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, like, share, and subscribe to the channel.